Overlord Volume 6 Chapter 9. Chapter 9, Daldry. Part 1. Love Fire Month, 9th month, 4th day 21:10. Feeling thirsty, the woman stirred lazily from her slumber. She squirmed slowly on her king-sized double bed and reached out for the pitcher of water by the bed, but the fingers only found air. It was then that she remembered that she had not set out a jug of water, and she clicked her tongue. Hoo-ah! She could not stifle her yawn. She slept like an old person, early to bed and early to rise, but she had only gone to bed just over an hour ago. She had not yet slept her fill. The woman swallowed and placed a hand on her throat. There was a dry, sticky sensation there, and she got off the bed to get a drink of water. She threw on a long, thick robe to cover her nude body, slid her feet into a pair of slippers, and exited the room. This was her Hilma, head of the Drug Trafficking Division's home base in the royal capital. Logically speaking, there should have been dozens of lackeys bustling about, but the interior was now dead silent, like it was empty. Surprised, Hilma walked to the corridor. This mansion was always quiet when there were no nobles around, but this was too quiet. She invited nobles to this place in order to build connections and relationships. Among nobles, even legitimate heirs would need to wait a long time before they could succeed the family estate. It was quite common for them to only do so after the age of 30. During this period, they could only ask the head of the house, that was to say, their father, for spending money. The same applied even if they were mature adults who were married with children. This was why Hilma invited these people to parties at this mansion. Hilma provided drink, women and drugs, all the while whispering sweet nothings into their ears designed to play on their pride. She allowed them to meet others in the same situations as themselves to build a sense of closeness. Hilma would entertain them and build friendly relations with them. Once these nobles inherited the estate, it was time for her to reap the harvest. If they dared sever ties with her, she would make sure they suffered for it. If they helped her out, she would reward them. In this way, she made further inroads into noble society. She walked along the quiet hallway, looking for water to drink. Silence was not a bad thing. She preferred the quiet to the noise of people. Though she did not show it on her face, she was actually very annoyed when she had to drink and hobnob with the nobles. However, the present circumstances were far too abnormal. This dead silence made her hair stand on end, and it even made her feel that she was the only person in this mansion. What's going on? It was impossible that even the guards had left their post without telling Hilma. She wanted to shout for someone, but if something abnormal had happened, it would be a very bad idea to let the enemy know where she was. She also considered just going back to her room and burrowing under her covers, but she might simply be awaiting her execution. People who don't move when they have to become food for others. This was a belief she subscribed to, and by adhering to that principle, she had risen from a high-class hooker to where she was now. She checked both sides of the empty corridor several times and only moved AEAD after verifying that there really was nobody there. Trusting in her sixth sense, she headed towards a secret room which only she and a few others knew. There were several magic items and gems there, as well as an escape tunnel. This might have been her home base in the royal capital, but she had several other safe houses in the city itself. Perhaps she ought to flee there. As she tiptoed along the hallway, Hilma realized something was off. What is this? The whisper escaped her mouth unbidden. Hilma had discovered the oddity outside the window. The window, made of sheets of thin glass, were covered in several layers of vines. As a result, almost no light could get in. She tried to open the window, but it would not budge. She hurriedly studied the other windows along the hallways. Each of them was choked with vines. What happened? Who could have? The windows were most definitely not like this before she had gone to bed. This could not have happened naturally in the space of an hour. That being the case, it was probably the work of magic. Who could have done this, and what was their aim? She had no idea about those points. Even so, she understood that her situation was very dire. Damn it. She cursed, and then she jogged ahead. She no longer cared about how her rope swayed here and there. All she wanted was to get into her secret room. She reached the staircase and looked down. It was still silent. Navigating by what little light managed to filter through the vines, she carefully descended the stairs. At the same time, she was grateful to the thick carpeting for masking her footsteps. When she reached the first floor, she was so shocked that she suddenly sucked in a lungful of cold air. There was a person in the hallway staring at her. That person seemed to blend into the shadows as it stood there, but it was not because they had shadow melding abilities like thieves or other related jobs. Rather, it felt that way because of their dark skin, which gave the wrong impression. That was a dark elf, and their mismatched eyes seemed to sparkle against the black cloth wrapping them. The dark elf let the black cloth wrapping them fall to the ground. Below it was girls' clothing. She held a black-colored magic staff, and she looked up to Hilma. The secret room was behind this mysterious girl. As she recalled the inner layout of the mansion, Hilma steeled herself and nervously approached her. If only she were a playmate brought along by some noble. However, Hilma immediately discarded her naive conjecture. When she heard that Crocodile had been captured, she had prepared to flee to a safe place to hide since she did not know how the higher-ups would react. Under these circumstances, there was no way her people would bring in outsiders, or fail to report such a thing to her. "Say, little girl." After calling out, Hilma wrinkled her brows in suspicion. She had seen all sorts of people in her past profession as a high-class prostitute. Her experience told her that this was not a girl, but a boy. Her clothes were exquisite and not the sort which ordinary people could afford. For all Hilma knew, even she might not have something of that quality. The Dark Elves had once lived in the Great Forest of Tob, and they were practically non-existent in the kingdom. Yet here was one now, wearing expensive clothes intended for another gender. If not for the sinister atmosphere, Hilma would have concluded that this child was a slave to satisfy some noble's degenerate lust. "Hey boy, what are you doing here?" She approached slowly and carefully, trying not to arouse his suspicion. "Hey auntie, are you the most important person in this place?" She was not displeased to be called an auntie. To a young dark elf like him, women of her age were probably all aunties. No. She stopped halfway. She had a bad feeling about this. To date, she had relied on her instincts more than anything else. She had always believed that her instincts were superior than common sense. Where common sense might have betrayed her, only her intuition had never failed her. "Yes. That's right. I'm the most important person in this mansion." Is that so? That's good then." The boy smiled. His smile was so pure that even under the present circumstances, it almost managed to ignite the desire to defile his purity within Hilma's heart. Well, I asked those people, and they told me that too." As if in response to the boy, a nearby door opened. A girl slowly stepped out from within. She looked like a girl wearing some kind of bazaar-made uniform, but what surrounded her was not the scent of perfume but the stink of blood and gore. Hilma covered her mouth and swallowed a scream. The maid's lovely little hand clutched a man's arm. It looked like she had ripped it from his shoulder socket, given the torn fibers of muscle. What's she? It seems someone wanted to attack this mansion, so we decided to finish up some things before those people came. Therefore, I asked her to come along. Please pay me no heed. It has been so long since I ate my fill, and I am very satisfied." She was able to address Hilma without moving her mouth. That was quite strange, but there were more pressing questions than that. What made Hilma shudder was the question of what exactly she had eaten to fill herself up. She could guess, but she did not want to believe. With those thoughts in her heart, she asked them, Then what? What about me? Are you going to eat me too? No. You have other uses, auntie." She could not relax. That was because her intuition told her that a more horrific fate awaited her. Then how about this, my boy? Want to have some fun with me?" She let the clothes draped over her body slide from her shoulder. This was her body, her pride and joy. When she had still been a courtesan, it would have cost a fortune just to spend the night with her. After that, she had kept any excess fat off her frame and maintained her sensuous figure. She was confident that she could fill anyone with all-consuming lust for her, even if her target was a child. However, there did not seem to be any unusual emotions in the boy's eyes. She could admit that her charms were inferior to that maid over there. Even so, she had been a pro, despite the fact that she was retired. Even if he did not swing that way, she could still arouse him. She elegantly worked her body in a serpentine fashion and slowly drew close, careful not to alarm him. She could not sense anything like desire from the boy. Therefore, she chose another course of action. She slowly extended a hand and put it around the boy's neck and activated a magic item. It was the viper tattoo. The tattooed snakes on both her hands came to life, raised their heads, and sprang out to bite the boy's body. Anyone bitten by the serpents and their powerful neurotoxic venom would die in spastic twitches. This was the ace in the hole for Hilma. One did not otherwise have a way to fight. However, the boy nimbly extended a hand and seized the whip-like snake as it struck, then proceeded to crush the life out of it without hesitation. The viper tattoo whooshed back onto Hilma's arms. Since the summoned snake had been killed, the tattoo could not be reactivated for a full day until it recovered. Hilma was now in the worst-case scenario of having initiated hostilities and having nothing to show for it, and so she stumbled back unsteadily. However, what most frightened her was the fact that the boy's expression had not changed at all during this string of events. He was not worried at being attacked, and neither did he show any hostility. Then, so, let's go? Go where? Just as Hilma began to wonder about his words, intense pain shot through her kneecap at that very same moment. The unbearable pain left her unable to stand and she collapsed to the ground. "Abara!" she wailed in anguish, breaking out in a cold sweat because of the pain, and then she looked down at her knee. She then regretted doing so. My leg. The kneecap of her left leg was twisted in the other direction, and bone protruded from her, blood red from her flesh. Hilma wept and made to squeeze her leg, which was in unbelievable agony. However, she hesitated. She did not dare touch it. The boy grabbed Hilma by the hair and then walked out. Hilma was dragged away by an arm strength that she could never have guessed at from the way he looked. Dozens of hair strands were wrenched out with a quiet snapping sound, but the boy did not seem to care. "It hurts. It hurts so much. Don't do this." In response to Hilma's wailing, the boy merely glanced at her, but did not halt his pace. I have to hurry up and get there.